Joining me now is attorney Nicole Pearson. Remember her website, factslawtruthjustice.com? I did all that from memory, folks, for the first time. Factslawtruthjustice.com is her website. And, you know, I talked about it earlier this week, and maybe you guys didn't believe me. And it sounded like it was a news story, but it's not a news story. Look at this headline at PJ Media. Newsom's prostitution law creates disturbing new sex market in L.A. Now, as we read about this, what we find out is, I guess there's a street in Los Angeles, and sadly, 12 and 13-year-old girls are being sex trafficked on this street. One individual reporter said, quote, gangs that had long sold drugs began to take advantage of this, I guess you call it Figueroa's lucrative opportunity. It's a corridor there. And they had dozens of girls. One trafficker could easily make $12,000 a night. Drugs are sold once and gone forever, but girls can be resold indefinitely, end quote. That's what I guess actually a police sergeant said, who had been in the division for 2 decades. Motel owners who noticed the parades of customers but feared the gang's retribution kept quiet. Whoa. Again, why you say, well, why is this important, Brandon? Well, because these are children, number one, obviously. But number two, we can combine this with that other law, AB 495, right? And what if you have a child that is picked up out of, I don't know, my state of Tennessee or another state, maybe where you live, because someone traffics them, claims that they're taking them to California for transition or LGBTQ counseling or services or abortion services. What they're really doing is grabbing them up and taking them to California where they can be protected and hidden out with the power of the government and maybe sex traffic. Because all these bills tie together. And the one that's been warning about it for so long is Nicole Pearson, as I said, with factslawtruthjustice.com. But also remember, Gavin Newsom's basically already running for president for 2028. So we better pay attention to what's going on, folks, right? She joins us now from California. Nicole, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I wish it was under better circumstances, but we knew we would get here, and here we are. Yeah,
we knew we would get here. We're going to go to AB 495 in a minute, but this, and Proposition 50. But this one right here, I didn't know about this until that article by PJ Media. I sent it to you, and you said, this is actually, based on an old bill. But there's a common denominator, is this state representative by the last name of Weiner, right?
Of course, always. This is actually stems from a report by the New York Times. They did an undercover investigation of what's now called Kitty's Stroll, meaning kitties as in children. And it's basically, like you mentioned, this strip of Figueroa where there is child sex trafficking out in the open, and police officers have figuratively, not literally, been handcuffed, no pun intended, by Senator Scott Wiener's bill, SB 357, that we opposed and that we were pushing against because it basically, just to explain it very neutral generally, is that it prevented police officers from, I don't know how to say. They like to say that they are being biased against minority and immigrant and transgender individuals when they were patrolling. And they just basically, SB 357 said that you can no longer apprehend individuals that you believe are loitering for the purposes of soliciting prostitution, that you have to actually catch them in the act. And because of this, it's such a high standard, a high threshold, because Senator Scott Wiener said that they were profiling these minority, immigrant, disenfranchised communities. They basically told police officers that you can't go, even if you have a very high suspicion, which is also known as probable cause, to believe that there is solicitation, prostitution happening. And so it's basically opened up the floodgates to allow these traffickers to dangle their carrots out on the streets without fear of apprehension.
Let me get this straight. Tell me if I am explaining this correctly. If you are a minority of some kind and they are, let's say a man, 45-year-old man, is loitering out on the street on this, what is known as a street where there's prostitution and trafficking of 12 and 13-year-old girls. And there's a guy there loitering around, standing around like he's looking for something. Because he's a minority and therefore we cannot be profiling people or be involved in any kind of racist and intimidating behavior on the part of the police are not able to question him. Sir, you're loitering. Why are you not moving on? What are you doing? Are you up to something you shouldn't be up to? So if
it's the opposite. And I did a terrible job because I was searching for that word profiling. So what happens is, and this is always the irony of democratic policies such as this, is that the majority of these sex workers is what they call them now. These sex workers, they are predominantly minorities, and they are
it's the 12 or 13-year-old girl that's standing around like she's waiting for a John.
Exactly. And so what was happening is that these Democratic legislators, these extremists, are saying that most of the people, the individuals that these police officers are apprehending and taking into custody are minority trans individuals. Well, I'm sorry, but the statistics just show that those are the individuals that are most likely to be abused, manipulated, and trafficked. So the statistics are what they are. It doesn't mean that we create a law that says that you cannot profile and you cannot make apprehensions if they end up being of minority, immigrant, and transgender individuals. It just so happens that these are the vulnerable individuals that we should be protecting. We don't create a law that says that you can't apprehend them. To be totally honest with you, I've been working in this field, this space, anti-human trafficking for a very long time. They are praying to get apprehended by police officers because they cannot report this abuse. They cannot report their trafficking and their exploitation because they could get killed. And so when they get apprehended and they're taken into police custody and they are forced, they're interrogated, and then they can divulge details of what's happening, that's a very different scenario than if they go running to the police station. So SB 357 was passed without any involvement with the stakeholders. And it was a tragic blow, a crushing blow to the anti-human trafficking movement because, again, it prevents police officers from profiling and from surveilling, noticing what's going on, and putting the pieces together to say, more likely than not, that girl standing there half, not even half, like basically not clothed, is likely loitering and soliciting and engaged in the illegal act of prostitution. So we need to take her in. Right now, the way that the law stands is they actually have to see a transaction, like the John needs to approach her, there needs to be exchange of money, she needs to enter into the vehicle, something of that nature in order for the police to intervene. And that's a really high threshold. And because of that, they can't take 12 girls who are loitering and bring them into custody and then bring them into connect them with services to extract them out of these human trafficking, these criminal rings. They have to individually witness each of these crimes being committed, which again narrows their impact and saving and extracting these survivors of human trafficking. And they also, I don't know if your viewers are aware, this also cut funding to the human trafficking sex crimes department. There used to be 6 investigators. Now there's only 1. So they're acting with impunity. And you guys know the open border policies, the terrible immigration policies that have been in place, the flood of traffickers and criminals who have come across the border. I mean, we have been inundated with criminals who are capitalizing, like you have said, we've talked about here before. Human trafficking is the new drug. It's better than arms trading. It's better than drug trafficking because, like you said, you sell the product once, it's out. But the younger the girl is, the younger the not the doe, but the victim is, whether she's a boy or girl and doesn't identify as either, the longer that he or she can be abused, and the more money that he or she can make for her traffickers. So it's literally incentivized child sex trafficking, which you and I have talked about for years now.
So one investigator from 6 down to 1, and then you make it so their job is basically impossible. Now, there's no way the traffickers just got this, quote, lucky, right? That, oh, look at that. They wrote a really bad bill that just happens to empower us. I mean, really? This had to have been done on purpose, right?
I mean, You know how I feel about all of this. I think it's a satanic attack on children. God's chosen children, God's real chosen people are the children, in my opinion. Woe to he who causes the little ones to stumble. And so I have always fought to protect children. They're the most vulnerable. They're the lowest hanging fruit. And so all of these attacks, whether they're in school, whether they're in the California legislature or truly any legislature across the country, all of these have been systemic attacks on parental rights, on bodily autonomy, and on children. Because again, whether you want to just think of it on a surface level about money and control and power, getting these children out of their homes, starting to groom them, abuse them, and then exploit them. I mean, that's a very realistic way to, it's a tragic, it's a disgusting. If you guys only knew what they really did to these kids multiple times a day for years and years and years, you would have a hard time understanding or comprehending it. But that's what's happening.
Have you ever gone down on that street? Have you ever gone down there?
No, not really. I mean, yes, I have, but not recently, not within the last 3 years.
Okay, but you have gone down there and you've seen some of this with your own eyes.
I have. Yes, I have. And I've worked with the survivors, and then we've worked with the prosecutors, and we've worked with Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force is one of the strongest anti-human trafficking task force in the country, because surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, Orange County is one of the dominant purveyors of sex trafficking, not necessarily child sex trafficking, but human trafficking, whether it's labor, indentured servitude, and certainly sex trafficking. We have a lot of prostitution here. We have a lot of convention centers, and we have Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm. All of the major highways come through this area. We have the Port of Long Beach and a lot of private airports. So we have a lot of human trafficking taking place right here in Orange County. So the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force is an incredible resource. They're doing the best that they can. Luckily, we have more resources here in Orange County. But LA County has a greater population and greater need.
Now, you mentioned private airports and conventions. So you're talking about people from all over America to all over the world, but you're also talking about people who sound like they have some wealth about them, some discretionary income, and in some cases, maybe actually very, very wealthy if you're flying in on private airplanes.
Yes.
So this isn't... not that it makes it right, but this isn't just going down in the seedy part of town and some kids have decided that they're going to sell themselves for some drugs and there's just the local bad people and hoodlums that are all partaking in this kind of activity. This, again, that doesn't justify it, but this is highly orchestrated, big business that is involving, I'm guessing, multinational gangs and trafficking rings, but you're also talking about people that are everything from what? Doctors, lawyers, judges, who? People in our governments?
Everybody.
Every walk of life. That would shock people, right?
It would shock people. And who do you think was on the Epstein list? We're talking about the elite of the world, some of the richest people in the entire world. The more money you have, the more tastes you can indulge, and the more opportunities and instances that you can engage. But, we have pornography is a huge problem in this country, especially with the advent of the internet, social media. Their tastes have been distorted, and there is a great need. United States of America is the largest consumer of child sex abuse material. That's a little bit separate than what we're discussing here right now. But we have a huge problem. I mean, just going to the fact that United States is a dominant, a world superpower, and its economy, et cetera. It's kind of analogous to what you're saying. I mean, the more money you have, the more resources you have at your disposal to participate in this. But as I've mentioned before, labor is the predominant type of human trafficking, and that can be, like we just mentioned, indentured servitude here in California. That can be farm workers. That can be construction workers. The marijuana, cannabis business. There are a lot of opportunities here to exploit individuals who come here, especially those who come here illegally, who don't have paperwork, or who may have paperwork and have that paperwork taken from them, and then they are told by their traffickers, by their captors, that they need to work for free, literally, until they pay off their debts. And that's never. They are just basically, again, forced labor, indentured servitude. I mean, slavery, there's over 40 million. We have more slaves now in the world than ever at any other point in human history. We have over 40 million people who are indentured, who are slaves. So, it's a big problem. More money, more opportunities for exploitation. I mean, it's such a huge issue on a global scale, and then on an American scale, and then certainly in California, and then again, like I just mentioned, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Orange County, and San Diego counties. I mean, we have people coming in off the coast, we have people coming in from the border, from the southern border, and then we have people flying in and driving up and down the interstate highways. So we have a lot of opportunities, and then we have a lot of wealth in the state. So there's a lot of demand here for what we're discussing.
Just heartbreaking is what it is. All right, so let's talk about Proposition 50, but also AB 495 is passed and signed into law by Gavin Newsom. So all of this goes together. So AB 495, we talked about that. People can be taken, young people, minors can be taken out of any state to California. Once they get there, they can claim they're there for LGBTQ services or abortion services or whatever it might be. And then they can start being provided the ability to hide. So the parents are, maybe out of New Jersey or Tennessee or Alabama looking for their child. They're in California, but they're not going to get a whole lot of assistance finding them. In fact, the government there might help them within about 6 weeks, change their name and hide them out, right?
Right. I mean, California is a human traffickers, a child predators, whether it's sex or otherwise, paradise. Any child can be brought here. The predator, the kidnapper, whether the individual is known to the child or not, can come. And if they say that they are an undocumented individual, or they're here to receive sexual reproductive health care or gender affirming care, California is a sanctuary state for those three types of individuals, those three, communities. So if the trafficker, who they are well aware of all of these policies, brings a child here, says, we're here for one of those three reasons, then California will not participate. They will not honor the lawful orders of another state, whether it's a warrant, whether it's a subpoena, whether it is a child custody order. They will say, we are not participating in the U.S. Constitution, the full faith and credit clause, and we are not going to honor or participate in the enforcement of those lawful orders from your home state, your conservative state of Texas or Tennessee. And then once the child is here, I will rattle off. I've tried to make a graphic of all of these bad bills, but there's so many. But what will happen is the trafficker can then take the AB 495 caregiver's affidavit. They can unenroll the child from school, enroll the child in school, or what they're really going to do is they are going to take it to medical providers to start drugging your child, therapizing your child, medicalizing your child, and perhaps even transitioning your child. Why? Again, going back to the pornography thing, people's tastes have gotten weird is an understatement. And there is a huge demand for transgender youth in the human trafficking, sex trafficking circles. So they're going to do it for that reason. They're going to do that because it's easier to manipulate and control and exploit a child, obviously, certainly, but certainly a child that is being medicalized and is either being therapized or on drugs that just placates them. It's easier. And then they're going to take them to court. And under Assembly Member Christopher Ward's bill, AB 223, which passed last year, they're going to be able to change their birth records confidentially, which is it's a huge problem. No notice to the parents or legal guardians, no opportunity to object. And now Assembly Bill 1084 was also passed. But this year, when we discussed this before, those petitions are being expedited. But to add salt to the wound, Senator Scott Wiener presented a bill this year as well, SB 59, that allows also adults petitions to change their names, their birth records, their names, genders, and sex identifiers to be done confidentially and expedited as well. So that would be done under 6 weeks, and then they would get the new records within 2 weeks. So we're talking about the erasure of these children before parents even understand what's going on.
Then tell me about this proposition. Is it 50?
It is Proposition 50. And I actually wanted to mention Senator Scott Wiener, who is the author of probably 85% of these bad bills in California that have been attacking not just children, but the trans community, the LGBT community that he is a part of and he claims to be supporting, and also minority and other immigrant or disenfranchised, marginalized communities, is running against, has announced that he will be running for Nancy Pelosi's seat. She hasn't announced that she is retiring, but I don't anticipate that she will run against the individual she's been grooming to take her position. So Senator Scott Wiener is poised to take these policies federally. So he did announce his intent to run for Nancy Pelosi's seat. So people need to be paying attention to what's been happening here in California. That has nothing to do with Prop 50, because I think that will be a smooth transition of power from Ms. Pelosi to Senator Scott Wiener. But Proposition 50 wants to do is they want to allow the legislators, the Democratic legislators in California, because we have a Democratic supermajority in both houses, and then obviously Gavin Newsom, who's demonic or Democratic, whatever you want to call him. It's his bill. It's his bill, and it wants to allow them to draft or write their own districts to ensure that they get elected into office. They're doing it allegedly in response to Texas, but basically they're overriding the people's will. We voted on this issue twice before, in 2008 and 2010. We have a independently elected commission of 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and 4 independents who draft the districts after each 10-year census. We voted on this issue. It's part of our California Constitution, and they want to rewrite that, override U.S. Constitution, California Constitution, the votes of the people in these previous elections, and to draft, design, craft, gerrymander their own districts to ensure that they get elected into federal office. Again, that's why we have always said, pay attention to California. We have a huge influence in Congress. We have a lot of seats. And so that's what they're trying to do with Prop 50. Everybody needs to vote no.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, here we have a guy that's going to run apparently for Nancy Pelosi's job, so go to the House of Representatives in D.C. And then you got Gavin Newsom, your governor, who's clearly setting up to run for president. So this is kind of a preview of the agenda to come if we don't get out in front of this and understand these are not political issues. These are spiritual worldview, spiritual warfare issues. I mean, any people of faith, any parent, any grandparent, obviously anyone with a moral conscience ought to understand this is far beyond Republican versus Democrat.
100%. 100%. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I couldn't agree with you more. As a lawyer, I mean, if I don't agree with what Texas is doing. I don't agree with Harmeet Dillon's letter to Texas. I don't agree with what's happening there at all.
That's about redistricting, you mean?
Correct. So what happened in Texas is the Fifth Circuit reversed a longstanding ruling in a case that allows for what's called coalition districts. When you have a state that has a significant population of immigrant or minority communities, but not enough to be the dominant community in that area or that district, was allowed these groups to band together to form what's called coalition districts. They exist all across the country. And so what they did just recently was that they reversed that decision. They said, you can't draw districts, and this is the Voter Rights Act. This is accurate. You cannot draw districts based on race. That violates the Voters' Rights Act. And so what the Department of Justice did was write a letter to Governor Abbott suggesting that because of the reversal of this decision, he might want to consider redistricting. And I don't mean to, I totally respect Ms. Dillon and all the work she's done for this country. I'm not being critical of her. I don't think that I don't think what Governor Abbott is appropriate. In fact, did is appropriate. And in fact, he's walking it back right now. There have already been significant challenges, multiple challenges to the new maps that they have drawn. And it's just not appropriate. We have a census every 10 years. It's actually funny. A lot of legal experts and commentators have been referring to or referencing California's commission, which was again, has been in place for several years now, over 20 years, of these independents and Democrats and Republicans that have pointed to this commission as the perfect example of a way to address gerrymandering and redistricting based on party politics. And then now we have Governor Newsom, who's trying to undo or just basically supersede, usurp this commission that people are pointing to as a model for the nation. He's saying, oh yeah, we don't want to do that here again. I mean, the irony is, there's no irony. It's just so brazen. But two wrongs don't make a right. I don't believe that what is going on in Texas should be happening, but I certainly don't think that we should do the same thing here in California. It just shows that Gavin Newsom doesn't have any respect for his constituents, his own constitution, the U.S. Constitution, all of which he's bound to uphold, and that he is just a vindictive, spiteful, silly man who doesn't know what he's doing and does not care about the rule of law, which is a very scary, based on what we've seen during COVID, is a very scary next step to exactly what we've been talking about in the last 5 years.
It is, again, something that became a big talking point when the movies were out about child trafficking and whatnot. And then it just kind of went away. That's got to be frustrating for you, who is on the front line fighting this every day. You saw some movement and some packed out theaters, 4 years ago now, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? What about now? Is it just kind of die back down and become, well, this is the way it is, or what?
It's really hard to see. I understand that, a very difficult concept to comprehend. And also people went straight into the deep end, right? They went straight to the heart of child sex trafficking, which is the smaller percentage of human trafficking. There's so much more trafficking that's going on. Like I mentioned, labor trafficking, there's organ trafficking, blood trafficking, and then child sex trafficking. As I've mentioned before, they typically will exploit the individual for as long as possible, whether it's working, in a construction site or on a farm, or a child sex in a brothel, and then use them until their bodies are exhausted, and then take their organs and their blood and then sell them. That's what's happening here. And what I'm saying to you is reality. It's on the Department of Homeland Security's website. It's on the Department of Justice's website. There are thousands of NGOs and organizations who are working against these realities. It's not I'm not being hyperbolic, and I'm not being, any of the things, a conspiracy theorist. It's a reality, but people went straight to the deep end. It's very difficult to comprehend what people do to children. I'm sure it's happened thousands of times, even during this podcast or this interview right now. And so I understand, but that's why when policies come out and people such as myself, such as yourselves, come out and we talk about them and we show unintended consequences, even though you and I understand that these are intended consequences, we ask you to do the really simple asks, which is share the information and vote, or send a comment online. We're not asking you guys to go undercover and to rescue children from a brothel. We're not asking you to, protect a child from organ harvesting, or an adult for that matter. We're just asking you to share the information and to make the phone calls and submit the emails and the letters. So, it's frustrating. I understand it from a psychological standpoint, an emotional standpoint, and a spiritual standpoint. I understand, but it's for those reasons. It's hard on us to comprehend, but imagine us or our children or our grandchildren being in that situation. Yeah. So that's what I would like people to keep in mind. Absolutely.
Do you think our government could crack down on this problem a lot more? In other words, do you think our governments, local, state, or federal government, know where these people are holding these children and trafficking these children? Our government has an awful lot of intelligence available to itself. Sadly, many of the police departments have gotten rid of their intelligence units over the years. So that's making it easier for crime. But do you think our governments, local, state, and federal government, turn a blind eye to some of this? We all thought the Epstein files would be out. We were told that this was a legitimate thing. Then we're told afterwards, no, it's all a hoax. So, the royal family must not think it's a hoax. They just stripped Prince Andrew of his titles and booted him out of a royal residence. So they must not think it's a hoax. I can't imagine they would do that.
Right.
King Charles III to his own brother if he didn't believe it.
Right.
So the point is, do you believe our governments know these things, could actually shut a lot of this down today, tomorrow, if they wanted to, and they just don't because there's too many powerful people involved, too many people who are at the top of the food chain involved in this?
That is such a complex question. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that law enforcement that is involved, like especially local law enforcement, even state at the state level that are involved in this, are really struggling to fight this, are really working to fight and combat human trafficking. It always comes down to a matter of resources, and it comes down to which are typically implemented or withdrawn with policies like SB 357, like AB 495, which is again why we ask you guys to get engaged on the local level. These strip or DEI policies, these woke policies. SB 357 was ushered in under the guise of, equity and compassion and anti-discrimination policies, right? Like, we don't want police officers to be racially profiling or, sexual orientation profiling and taking in, this little boy who's clearly dressed as a woman standing on a street corner at 3 a.m. because probably that child, especially when you keep in mind that transgender youth are 12 times more likely to be human trafficked, to be sex trafficked. God forbid a police officer do his job and put her job and put the pieces together and take that child and rescue them from human trafficking. I think the individuals, the boots on the ground, are doing the best that they can. I think that there have been a lot of rescues and extractions that have been happening across the country that we don't hear about. They don't really advertise them. And there really, again, isn't the appetite because people don't want to hear about this. People do not want to hear about human trafficking and certainly not about child sex trafficking. So I don't think that a lot of the major news sources want to, cover these issues. And then I do think that it implicates, like you said, it implicates school principals, doctors, nurses. It's, you guys, it is people like you and me who are not like you and me exactly, but people that we fraternize with. If you look at the group, I don't know what the statistic is now, but I think at one point it was like in a group of 1 in 25, one of the individuals was engaged. Oops, sorry.
So you're talking about people that people that live in your neighborhood.
Yes, I am. Sorry about that.
Right.
But I think at one point there was a statistic that it was like 1 in 25 had engaged in one way or another within the last 12 months in human trafficking. I mean, it's also about moving people, right? It's about bringing the people and then moving the individual against their will. So there are a lot of elements that go to the crime. But
well, if you have people who are going to the Super Bowl, and I guess there's a lot of trafficking at the Super Bowl. If you're going to the Super Bowl, you're pretty well heeled. You're pretty well off financially.
Exactly.
Because the travel, the hotel, everything goes up, right? The rates of the hotels go skyrocket. They move the prices up. The tickets to the Super Bowl are really expensive. So you're talking about people with big financial discretionary income. And you're like, it's doctors, it's nurses, it's lawyers, it's people you would... educators, principals, superintendents. I mean.
Well, and you think too, like they think, oh, she's 18. Oh, well, that one wasn't 18. That one was 17. Oh, well, next time it was like, oh, she wasn't 17. She was 16 and a half. That's a child. So anybody under the age of 18 in California is a child. So you are involved in child sex trafficking. And people don't want to acknowledge that. People have made mistakes, but also people are willfully blind. It's called in the law, you're willfully blind. Did you really have an honest, genuine belief, sincere belief that she was 18 years old? Well, let's look at the circumstances. Was it reasonable for you to believe that she was 18? Did you ask for her ID? Did you intentionally not ask for her ID? Was she able to order a drink? This, that, and the other. People are engaged in this sometimes by accident, but certainly because they don't want to know. And a lot of people are doing it. So I would really like to emphasize that that pornography has distorted sex, has distorted what is acceptable, what the new threshold is of what normal is, and children boys as young as 9, that's the average age for a boy to be exposed to what's now standard pornography, which is not the pornography of your or my time, and the average age for girls is 11. So it's the perfect storm for, just taking advantage of these vulnerable children who are they're warped. They are warped, and they go to schools and they hear weird things. And then we have bills that say that the teachers can have secret, inappropriate conversations with them in secret and hide the secrets in the conversations from the parents. And then we have California trying to lower the age of consent. A 12-year-old can consent to mental health services, including rehab, abortion, sexual reproductive health care. We have the age of consent slowly drifting slower and lower to the age of 12. We have them leaving home for any reason, and we have all the perfect, all the tools for a human trafficker to take advantage of that. And we see that with this SB 357, which is, the kiddies miracle mile now that we have in LA. It's the perfect storm.
I dealt with this in a chapter from my book I wrote in 2008 that came out in 2009, Brave Influence. John Maynard, or Alfred Kinsey, Sexuality to Human Male, I think 1948, Sexuality to Human Female came out in the early 50s. He said that these kids should be sexually active by age 6 before, things become religiously taboo and whatnot. All sex, he said, was equal, regardless of adult or child. And then, of course, you have the North American Love Boy Man Association and all these other groups. And this is now, of course, in television and pop culture, and the curriculum, the books we've shown in my documentary on Brainwashed America. We scrambled it, but it was a book called It's Perfectly Normal. And if you were to show that on a terrestrial TV station, you could be charged with obscenity, but you can give it to 10-year-old kids in the school. But if you showed it, held up the color pictures on terrestrial television, it's obscenity, you'd be charged. I mean, this is, none of this is happening as, this is just a piece and this is just a piece. All of this is going together. These are all people that are working together for various reasons, to destroy societies, to destroy families, marriage, normal sexuality, or because, again, they're looking for a crop of new people that they're grooming. But all of this goes together as one big puzzle. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes. Oh, shoot.
And Hollywood, of course, has made a hero out of Alfred Kinsey. They made a movie telling you how great the guy was. I couldn't even put in the book some of the stuff he was up to because I didn't want the teenagers reading it. And I wanted my book to be for high school students. I wanted them high school to adult. I'm like, I'm not putting this in a book. Adult doesn't need to read this, but certainly not a high school student. And I'm not putting it in the book. But Alfred Kinsey was so demented with his team of experts that were systematically involved in the molestation of children as young as 3 months of age, all the way up to 17 or 18, whatever they were. And of course, a lot of the people he was surveying, we thought, they're surveying the average American male. Turned out they're surveying a lot of people that have been charged with sex crimes who are prisoners, right? And these team of experts, not to get too graphic, were literally systematically molesting children as young as 3 months of age, trying to bring them to sexual stimulation and timing it with a stopwatch, okay? And saying that when this child is engaging in really responding to sexual rape, that's somehow, the child's enjoying that. And this all went on one table called the Table 34. And it's all there. And I've been studying this and talking about this since the mid-90s. And this is the basis of our sex ed curriculum today. SECUS, Sex Education Information Council, Planned Parenthood. This all comes out of John Maynard, Alfred Kinsey's world into our schools. But the average parent, the average pastor has no idea that someone that was for children as young as 6 engaging in sex, even with adults, is the basis of our school curriculum today. Closing comment, true or false?
True. I didn't know if you were going to say it, but I was going to bring it up. Children as young as 3, and I think that they timed how many times
3 months
they would
old.
reach
3 months
climax.
old. It's young as
that they
3
were,
months old.
Yep. Yep. True. All true.
Look at this website. I don't know how you do this day in and day out. I have a hard time getting through these interviews, much less you do this day in and day out, Nicole. This is so tough.
Yeah.
Here it is, factslawtruthjustice.com, factslawtruthjustice.com. I hope you'll support her. I hope you'll keep up with what she's doing. I know we keep bringing her back on. We're talking a lot about California, but you need to understand, California is oftentimes the model legislatively for a lot of the other states in our country. And we have people running for federal office and a guy that's about to run for president, and they're going to try to have him run back to the middle and tell you how he is so mainstream. Well, we've been laying these programs down as markers all along the way. So America, you can't say you weren't warned. And something tells me these clips in 2027 and 2028 will come back up, and we'll be sending them as clips saying, look, the date of that. October 31st, 2025, we were telling you about Newsom and what he was allowing to happen in his state. So please support her work and what she's doing and pray for her and her family. factslawtruthjustice.com, factslawtruthjustice.com. As always, Nicole, thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you and being here. Thanks for your support.
Thank you. Nicole Pearson checking in tonight. factslawtruthjustice.com. You know, it's a tough job to be a parent. She's a parent. She's a wife. She has a busy life. She's a skilled attorney. And, you know, she could go practice a different kind of law at a firm that didn't involve this kind of emotional stress, right? Stuff she knows and has to hear about, and then goes and fights. But, you know, there's a reason why a lot of people don't want to do what she's doing. And we need more people like her. But this is reality, folks. This is what is happening to our country. And I know that people don't want to hear about it, but we can't just ignore it, because this is an increasingly growing problem. And many, many people sadly wait until it's in their state. And then they're like, well, how did that happen? Well, if you'd only known, that's a common phrase I hear. Well, if I had known that, well, we're trying to give you a warning in advance. We're not trying to be doom and gloom. We're trying to be proactive and tell you in advance. This is the growing trend. You better watch legislatively what's happening in some of these leading states for this, like California, because you're going to wake up and find out some of this stuff is in your state. And then it's going to be your child, your grandchild, your niece, your nephew that's being trafficked and you can't find. And you're going to wonder why. Or kidnapped, because they're creating demand for this. And you're going to wonder, how is it we have children disappearing? Because we have created an environment for this. And we have tied the hands of law enforcement. Can you imagine? They had 6 cops investigating child trafficking, and now it's down to 1? And now they can't ask a child who's standing around on the street corner, who, as she said, is very scantily dressed, and the police officer, because they're a minority, they can't ask, what are you up to? So I've been doing this 36 years. And I am shocked, frankly. I'm not desensitized. I don't think most of you in this audience are either. You and me tuning into this broadcast. And I hope I stay shocked. But even after someone who's been doing this kind of thing for 36 years next year, I'm shocked at the laws that are passing. That if someone had told me, well, I remember being a kid and I remember being in high school and people talking about, oh yeah, one day won't be long before boys are using girls' showers and locker rooms and vice versa. I'm like, that's never going to happen. No, no one's going to tolerate that. Here we are. The things that you hear here, you must be going, are these people crazy? They actually pass legislation like this. Well, they do. It is nuts, the people that are getting elected to office, because I guess we, the people, vote for some of them. Election fraud might come into play for some of it. But you look at these members of even on the House side, And the stuff that they say, what they say they're for, the groups they promote and defend, the indefensible. And you're like, how on earth did they ever get into office? But they do. And this is a growing problem, as you heard her say several times. What is now the desired appetite of people is something modest people would never talk about. We wouldn't verbalize it on the air, but she was hinting at it because this is where we are in the cultural stream. And because there's a demand for it, now apparently there's a big market for it. And like I said, we can either talk about it and try to fight it and be aware of it in our state so that we're not shocked when we see this growing trend of young people disappearing. You know, the whole thing when I was growing up was children appearing on milk cartons. Remember that? Young people appearing on milk cartons. That's not even a thing anymore that I've seen. What was once shocking, stories that were shocking, and kids being on milk cartons, that's now, we're way past that as far as the activity of children disappearing, the numbers, the sheer volume. And now we've got legislation that works against the parents. It wants to criminalize the parent. It wants to criminalize the parent who wants to take the child to a counselor or a pastor to talk about what they've heard, what they're feeling, what they want to try and experience because of the propaganda they've been told, the brainwashing. And if you try to do that, there are, as we have dealt with in places like La Crosse, Wisconsin, they want to criminalize the parent for taking your child to a pastor or a youth pastor for Christian counseling. My child has some questions. They're struggling. I don't know how to answer all these questions when it comes to this. Can you help me, pastor? I want to bring my child in. You could be criminally prosecuted for trying to talk your child out of engaging in certain thought or behaviors. We can't have parents doing that. We can't have parents being parents. And again, if someone had told you back in the 80s that this kind of thing would be going on, if someone had told you back in the 80s that would be legislation being worked on at the city level in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where we have interviewed the former city council members who are fighting this, you would say that would never happen. Not in a nice, medium-sized, wholesome community like La Crosse, Wisconsin. Well, I know that community. I've been going to La Crosse, Wisconsin and speaking at churches since the mid 90s. Actually, more like the early 90s. And if someone had said then that's what will be going on in that community, I would have said no. The churches in this community would have a fit. And some did. But this kind of thing is going on a national basis. And I think that for whatever reason, as Nicole said, a lot of networks don't want to talk about this. They don't want to do stories on this. I understand it's probably more attention grabbing to talk about the right versus the left, Republicans versus Democrats over and over. Maybe that gets more ratings. Well, maybe it does. But as she already quoted, better if someone has a millstone tied around their neck and thrown overboard than to make one of these little ones stumble. This is really, you can tell a lot about a nation by the way they treat their children and the way they treat their senior citizens. You can tell a lot about a country. And I'm not liking, and I'm sure you aren't either, what we're seeing at either end. From sex trafficking, enabling it, encouraging it, really. How could you say that's not the case, these laws? The way children are being treated in that regard, parental authority abused horrifically, all the way to senior adults. And it won't be long before active euthanasia is something that is very, very commonplace. It's already basically right underneath the water. But it won't be long before active euthanasia becomes very open and in your face in America. And you're going to look at this and go, how did this happen? Well, again, you can see the trends with how we treat children and how we treat senior adults. And then once you've normalized all this, it won't be long before political dissidents or those who don't line up with the acceptable political views are dehumanized and mistreated and civil liberties destroyed as well. Because we condition the culture for dehumanizing children and dehumanizing senior adults. Dehumanizing children for self-gratification and dehumanizing senior citizens for monetary reasons, for human resource reasons. And once you've taught a culture that you can dehumanize people for your own personal gain as a collective group of people, then watch it as the people in the middle get dehumanized and their civil liberties stolen because they go against the collective wishes of the majority. So self-preservation, not to mention morality, but self-preservation says you better pay attention to the barometers of how a culture treats its children and its senior adults. And if you don't want to do it from the perspective of morality and what is right, what is wrong, then do it from the perspective of self-preservation of a free society. We'll be right back after this break. Go to worldviewtalk.com. Get your satellite phone like I have, because you know what? China is in on our power grid. That is a matter of proven fact. If you want to have communications with your loved ones, your family, your children, maybe your spouse travels, maybe you have a child away at college, you want communication should the grid go down. That's why you need a satellite phone, worldviewtalk.com. But look what else they have. They also have solar generators. I have one of their solar generators. I have the Delta Echo 400, a solar generator. So I can, of course, charge my satellite phone. I can run my coffee pot. I can run my whole house if I want to. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com, or use that number, 1-866-738-3224. They have very friendly operators that will explain to you their products, but you can explain to them what it is you're desiring to acquire. How much electricity are you wanting to generate with this solar generator? Well, they'll tell you what size you need. Worldviewtalk.com or 1-866-738-3224.